Lesson 38, and the last section of the philosophy of the Kleshas. We read from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, chapter 2, Sutra 20. The seer is pure consciousness, but though pure, appears to see through the mind. The seer, that is your soul, that is Purusha, that is your pure consciousness. For normally conditioned people, it's very difficult to grasp unless you have some experiences of supernatural kind of phenomenon occurring in which you felt momentarily super conscious or beyond conscious. But this is a very difficult concept, and I'm going to try to explain it in a very practical way. Throughout this course, I've been talking about the universe taking care of things, deciding things. In my mind, I interpret things in a certain way. And that is determined, not only determined, but limited by the way that I am conditioned through the experiences in life. So you're boxed in that sense. That is where the expression thinking out of the box comes from, in my opinion. So, when I took a break from yoga and my dog had died, previous one, I thought, I'm free. And now I want to be free from the duty of caring for a dog and from teaching. Now I can travel again. I could go visit my family in the Netherlands, or just go to Jeju-do if I want to. My mind created that idea. The universe had other plans. When I talk about the universe, that is in fact the seer. And the more sensitive you become, the more you cannot ignore it. When Pada came onto my path, it was simply not an option to say, this is not mine to take care of, this is not mine to be concerned about. That feeling is so strong, you have sleepless nights from it. Next thing, when the dogs try to look at the whole picture, I decided to take a break, and then Pada came. Pada prevented me from starting a new class because he was a wild dog in the beginning. I couldn't leave him alone. So I needed to be there. I couldn't even, if I wanted to, teach a class. It's all arranged like that, and you can say it's a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. And the fact that Pada ran away, coming all the way from Seoul Daeipgu, Seoul National University, on his way, passing through the park, basically from his house, straight line back to the center where he came from. For me, there is no coincidence. He was on his way back to his sister. That is why he ran away in the first place. They were separated, but they have been together too long. Dogs that from birth have been together for a year or more, you cannot separate them anymore unless you cause them great trauma. Pada ran away, Bobby withered away because she was missing Pada. It's a plot from the universe. And the universe wanted Pada to come to me because I was able to connect the dots and ended up finding out about Bobby and bringing her too. That is the seer at work. That is intuition at work. You cannot ignore that anymore. But the mind is very primitive in a way. Primitive because it's not capable to think out of the box. Its inspiration is not inside the mind. Brilliance, genius is not inside the mind. That's all qualities, characteristics of the seer, the soul. So we have a problem here. No, let's not approach it in a negative way. The positive thing is that as a result of your yoga practice, you become more and more connected with that seer inside you. But it is not easy, because I remember very clearly that for years I struggled with the dilemma. Whenever I had ideas, thoughts, insights, I was asking myself, is this my heart showing me the way, or is it my mind making things up? That is the battle between the head and the heart. And enormous books are written about this dilemma, showing that throughout the history of mankind, we have struggled with this. And the struggle is there because it is so subtle, so difficult to grasp. But the more you continue on this path, the more connected you become, the more obvious it becomes. This is how a human being technically functions. You have the head, Ajna Chakra, is the intellect. Very important aspect of the human being. The seer, that is an entity above that. And also in people who do not meditate, the seer is also active at a low level, but you do receive impulses, input from that higher level of consciousness. You just are not aware of it. What the Sutra is saying is that whatever it is that you are seeing, you interpret that with the rational thought in Ajna Chakra. The Ajna Chakra is like a secretary that sits behind the desk with 7 phones. And those phones once in a while ring, giving information. Not only from the intuition, which is the crown chakra, from the soul, but also from the lower levels of consciousness that also send signals. You feel something when there is fear. You feel something in the belly, the lower belly, Muladhara chakra. But you interpret it, you concretize it, you make it concrete information through Ajna Chakra. So you look at everything through the mind. And unconditioned people or untrained people, for them it's just one entity, but for us we see that there is a dilemma. And why is it a dilemma? Because the intellect is limited depending on how it is conditioned, while the seer is limitless. In contemplation, you can develop insights that go outside of the box, outside of the limitation of your conditioning. And that is where genius occurs. That is where inventors or scientists come with revolutionary technology or ideas, insights. That is how a yogi goes through life based on insights. And that is why I've mentioned several times before that life of a yogi, although on the outside looking rather boring, is in fact a very dynamic path of constant growth and evolution, development, because that source is much bigger than in an unconditioned, in an untrained person. So everybody, people who don't meditate, practice yoga or other spiritual practices that stimulate that connection with the crown chakra, they too have moments of insight, reflection, contemplation. But it's, how do you say, far between? The moments that it happens is just scarce, rare, doesn't happen so often, and well, as a yogi, it occurs more and more frequently, on a daily basis even. The ability to reflect, whenever you are confronted with something, you just spontaneously, naturally have the ability to go in a mode of reflection, simply to touch the essence of whatever it is that you're dealing with. That can be a material matter, a technical matter, but it can be an immaterial matter, a situation. You develop a very deep insight in patterns. And to prove that, you can do an intelligence test, an IQ test. Before yoga and 2 or 3 years later, you will see that your score increases considerably, mainly because of your increasing depth of insight. Because IQ tests for the most part exist out of you being able to recognize patterns and based on that give the right answer. So life is full of patterns and you develop a grasp on that, insight. A book that deals with the battle between the head and the heart, I don't know if I mentioned it before, that is the Bhagavad Gita, which is a very thick book that if you read it without insight, appears to be an epic story about a battle, truly a battle, with chariots and people killing each other, battlefields. But it is symbolical language, a symbolical story about the dilemmas that we face in life because we are not able to distinguish whether what we think or feel is made up or whether it is coming from above. That battlefield, by the way, is called Kurukshetra. And Kurukshetra is that battle between the head and the heart. It is a battle indeed. But you get better and better at it. Sutra 21, the very being of the scene is for his sake. So we touched upon this last week already a little bit. God created the world for mankind. So there are people on the spiritual path that say it is important, it is necessary to forsake the material world. Withdraw yourself into a hut, far away from civilization, from society, and spend the rest of your days in meditation, close to God or whatever. That is not Patanjali's idea. Patanjali is, in fact, very down to the ground. The world is there for us. And it is, in fact, an appeal to realize the importance of that. Because we have something that other creatures do not have, and that is intellect. The ability to rationalize, think. And that gives us an enormous level of control over the natural world, the environment, the world of matter. In the Bible, there is this phrase that God created the world for mankind. Which means, I think I told you before, whenever something is labeled divine or from God, it asks from you to respect the value of it. And that is what it means. And that is important in light of how we have evolved as human beings, strayed away from that path. And we are destroying our environment. We are blowing up mountains because we need space for a new apartment complex. A mountain that has been there for millions of years is just destroyed and will never come back. If you go to France, you see a very interesting contrast. Of course, you cannot stop progress, but in France you can choose two options when you drive through the country. You can take the Route Nationale, which is the old roads. And the old roads go with the environment. So they didn't blow up mountains, they didn't dig holes through the mountains. The roads go with the mountains, around the mountains, through the villages. You can take the toll route, the péage it's called. So you have to pay toll, and that's a straight road. And it goes through everything and anything. And whenever there's an obstacle, it's just being cleared out of the way through, of course, destruction. So it's progress. You can travel a lot faster. But, you know, on the other hand, we are causing damage to the environment that sustains us. That is irreparable to some, yeah, it's irreparable. There are many people these days, that environmentalists, that will tell you that, you know, we are all one, and humankind cannot be sustained if we destroy the environment that feeds us, that sustains us. And that is what this comes down to. The world is there for us, but we, especially we as human beings, must take that role seriously as keepers of that world, including the animals and the plants and everything in it, and our fellow human beings, of course. So live life, enjoy life. It's too short to be miserable, but consciously, with some respect. There are many generations to come that want to live just like you. Sutra 22. Although it becomes non-existence for him whose purpose has been fulfilled, it continues to exist for others on account of being common to others. What does that mean? It's very simple. As a practitioner of any transformative practice, in our case yoga, transformative, you change. But change comes very gradually, so gradual that you don't actually notice it. But you become more sensitive. You will have more insight into patterns. This leads you to become rather eccentric. It leads you to become rather perfectionist. Because everything has to have a logic, a certain order, a certain pattern that creeps in very slowly and gradually, very naturally. This sutra addresses the problem that occurs when you're not aware of how you have transformed, and you keep looking at other people by comparing themselves with how you function, which you have done all your life, but now you're looking at it from a perspective of transformation. So you become acutely aware of other people's lack of insight, other people's imperfections, other people's lack of order, organization. And then if you're not aware, you start to complain. You start to feel superior and they are inferior. Patanjali warns here for that. Appreciate the change, but use it in a positive way for yourself and if possible for the world around you. But be careful not to become a perfectionist in a negative way. In a way that you set yourself off compared to other people as being better than them. This is an issue that you find in spiritual circles rather often. So Patanjali here addresses that issue, and all people on the spiritual path should in fact be made aware of that through a scripture like Patanjali's or otherwise teachings from their mentors and teachers. So humility, appreciate, be. I feel very privileged that I have been allowed to be on this path. And I know exactly how I function in terms of, I'm very eccentric, let me use that word. But I also know that I cannot expect that from other people. And you do that by simply using your heart, understanding that people have not gone through the transformation that you have gone through. 23. The purpose of the coming together of the Purusha and Prakriti is gaining by the Purusha of the awareness of his true nature and the unfoldment of powers inherent in him and Prakriti. Another beautiful text that makes you scratch your head. Purusha is the soul, the seer. Prakriti is the world of matter, the world around us. Your soul manifested into a physical body, and with that it manifested into Prakriti, the world of matter. Patanjali tells us that the reason why you came down here on earth is to live and based on the experiences of living life in the material world with alertness, with eyes open, consciously, learning lessons from failure, etc. we elevate ourselves, we grow towards the light, we eventually liberate ourselves. This, like 2 sutras before, is against the idea for spiritual people to bury themselves in a temple or a monastery for the rest of their lives, to just meditate, pray, study the holy books, and never come out of that temple anymore. Because the real work and the real transformation starts when you come out of your temple and start living among the people in normal society. That is, if it is correct, your abbot, the abbot of the temple or the monastery, would at some point tell you to leave. Maybe after 5 years or after 10 years, but at some point you would be told to leave. They will then say you must serve the people, but really what you need to do is start living life, experiencing life, and start the real growth. Because just studying and meditating, which is of course important, but if there is no sounding board, is that a proper expression? If there is no sounding board to which you can measure yourself, there's no way that you are going to even realize your changes, your transformation, your growth, your abilities even. Patanjali is mentioning that living life in society leads to the awareness of your true nature, which is soul consciousness, your true self with capital S, and the unfoldment of powers inherent not only in yourself but also in the natural world around us. So there's no way that development can take place if we don't expose ourselves to that. It may seem comfortable and safe to stay behind the walls of the monastery. It may seem insecure and unsafe to go outside of those walls, but it is a necessary exposure that we have to allow ourselves to. So the world is your playground. It really is. And that makes it sound a little bit frivolous, but it's serious business. Because life is serious business. But go and start living consciously so that you will gain control over life, your destiny. And that is the powers inherently in you that can then unfold.
I have one question.
Yes.
What is the definition for the creation of this universe?
Say again, what is the?
I mean, like, use the creation. So he said that, like,
The definition
this
of creation?
tells us that creation is there for you. So creation of the universe, right?
Yeah.
So
Creation of the universe, creation of the earth, creation of all the plants, animals, creatures, and us included.
Question. So this creation has done, or it is just
It's
creating?
evolving, it's constantly evolving. The universe is like an organism,
Yes.
only the timeline is different. You are a living organism, the universe is a living organism. You have a timeline of about 80 years, give and take. The universe, we don't know exactly yet, although astrologers, or they have a bit of an idea, but nobody knows exactly. The earth, the sun, at some point, will come to the end of its life. and expand, and in that process it will destroy all the planets. But that will take some billions of years. But like a human organism, it has a start and an end.
Yeah, but you know, in the next line.
But it doesn't mean that the universe is ending with that event. The universe, we don't know. We have an idea where it started about 13 billion years ago. We call it the Big Bang. But we don't know what was before that. And we don't know when it will come to an end. But according to all living organisms, there is an expiration date, apparently.
The other question, like in the next line, is that you are the Lord of this creation.
Yes. That is an appeal to you realizing the power that you have to destroy the environment and the creatures that live in it, or to help it flourish and live in that environment without sucking it out, sucking it dry, or destroying it. Being a lord over creation carries inherently a responsibility. You must take care of it. Let's go back to politics. There was a politician not so long ago. He became the lord over a people, and he left a lot of chaos and destruction in his wake. He was not aware of his responsibility. The only care that he had was care for himself and his friends and family. And the other hundreds of millions could simply just drop that, and he wouldn't care less. Then comes another lord, and he immediately starts resetting things with a heart. And he hardly ever uses the word I. I am this and I will do that. And he goes to work and he tries to, of course it will never be 100% perfect, but he tries to consider everybody. He starts the healing process. He is a lord who knows the responsibility that comes with that position. That is what it means. That person without such responsibility, that was truly an anomaly that you can only explain. Well, I say, that is democracy. Democracy is not perfect. It has many flaws. But what is the alternative? The alternative is dictatorship, communism, Marxism, what have you. All kinds of experiments that have been tried, and that led to genocide and collapsing of economies and what have you. So democracy has allowed something like that to happen. It shouldn't happen, but the good thing about it is that we learn from it. A dictatorship where people are not allowed to move without permission is frozen. And will not evolve. A dictatorship, I mean a democracy, Korea, Europe, America, it's vibrant, it's alive, it's creative, but that freedom of democracy also leads to the imperfections that are there. And that has resulted in somebody becoming the Lord who totally didn't qualify. And many people who allowed it to happen because it is democracy, because it is the voice of the people. And, well, there are many things to say about that, but you will have your own thoughts about that. So how did we end up in all this Kurukshetra, this battlefield, the battle of the head and heart? Sutra 24 says, the cause is the lack of awareness of your real nature. Yoga goes out from the point of view that we are all ignorant. Even though we studied, have diplomas, degrees, we may have a lot of knowledge about material things, theoretical things, but we are oblivious of the nature of the universe, the nature of spirit, the nature of ourselves, the construction, as I have shown you, starting with energy and then condensing and leading to the manifestation of the physical body as the end product. Yoga and other spiritual practices in essence are designed to destroy that ignorance, to go from avidya to vidya, to go from ignorance to wisdom. That is why energy must rise, because wisdom is only possible if it's fueled in the crown chakra. Insight, brilliance, genius is all located at that higher level, and it just doesn't manifest if there is no energy available. That is what it basically is about. So we have an education system that started out with the same purpose. An education system, education is very powerful. You can see the divide in Europe, for example. You have the conspiracy theorists, you have the people resisting authority. They are usually people with lower levels of education. People who have had the privilege of continued education up to higher education, university level education, they're generally more inclined to not engage in conspiracy theories, because they see that it is based on lies. They have at least some functioning of the crown chakra that allows them to see the truth with a capital T, beyond all the delusion, the lies, and the deceit, deliberate deceit spread by people who manipulate that part of the population that is kind of in the dark. So education is very powerful, but it has a little bit overshot the goal. It does lead to a very well-developed intellect, which is what distinguishes us from other life on earth. And it does lead to some extent of the crown chakra functioning, but very selectively. So we have a hard disk that has no room, or not much room anymore, for contemplation, for natural science. At a high level of education, we are still mentally conditioned to see the world through certain lenses in a kind of limited way, but with an ability to sometimes think out of the box, or see out of the box. So it is, my opinion is that yoga and other systems like it are in fact the ancient form of education. And they are structured in such a way that they open up your insight and wisdom without burdening you with the memorization of large amount of data which you need to memorize in order to pass a certain test. So the essence of education is, like yoga, it has overshot the goal. Out of ignorance again. You can see the same with yoga, because modern yoga also is not yoga anymore, just like education is not like it was intended to be. Because modern yoga is focused on the physical body, or on all kinds of dogmatic ideas that cannot be practically explained. So it's very tricky, very difficult. So the reason why we are facing all these challenges, obstacles, dilemmas, is simply ignorance. Sutra 25. The dissociation of Purusha and Prakriti brought about by the dispersion of avidya is the real remedy, and that is the liberation of the seer. So you're being told to live life in the world of matter, and now you're being told to dissociate. Dissociation is not separating yourself, dissociation is simply being aware. Consciousness. Your ability to distinguish between conditioned thought based on ignorance, based on limited conditioning, and input from a higher level of consciousness. How do you do that? That is simply a matter of the previous sutra, living life based on the idea that the world is your playground. The condition that is being suggested here, where you are able to rise above yourself and see the difference between Purusha and Prakriti, that is a condition that takes years to bring about. And the most powerful way to do that is not meditate in isolation, but to live in the real world and make that world your testing ground. Every day, every experience is a learning experience once you start approaching it in this way. That is the suggestion. And in the beginning, you scratch your head. How am I going to separate what I receive through the head and what I receive through the heart, or through Purusha and Prakriti? You don't know in the beginning, because you don't have the experience. Often you have an experience, and it is only in hindsight that you are able to put the pieces of the puzzle into place, that you say, okay, now I see. And that is your ability to see patterns. You go through an experience, and then you evaluate what happened, how did it happen, what caused it to happen. And that is how you become an experienced yogi, or an experienced seer that can eventually even anticipate. Rather than having to look back, you can already see things manifesting before they have fully manifested. And that allows you control. That allows you to say, I feel something going to happen that is inauspicious, that is destructive, that is negative, that is... So you simply abort the process. And when you're on another string, another path that you intuitively feel is going to evolve into something that is in line with you, that is auspicious, that is leading to further evolution, then you pursue that more. 26. How do we do all this? We're coming to a climax here. The conclusion is very obvious. how do we achieve all this? How do we, well, Patanjali says, Sutra 26, the uninterrupted practice of the awareness of the real is the means of dispersion of avidya, of ignorance. Pay attention, stay alert, investigate. Even a slight tinge of a feeling, positive or negative, but always keep your eyes open. Be alert, the alertness of the deer. Pay attention. Everybody makes mistakes. But we make mistakes from now on and learn something from it so that we improve, so that we possibly don't make that mistake again in the future. So avidya, ignorance, turns into vidya, insight, wisdom. But how do you do that? How do you become more alert? You cannot say, okay, from today I'm going to be more alert. Does it work? No, of course not, because alertness is a condition. Or the lack of alertness is a condition, a tamas condition. Tamas condition leads to bluntness of the senses, including the sixth sense. So, how do we bring alertness about Sutra 27? In their case, our case, the highest stage of enlightenment is reached by 7 stages. So Patanjali is suggesting here that the highest stage of enlightenment is samadhi. This also makes clear that samadhi is not an exercise. It's a condition. It's the condition in which you are omniscient. You are ultra connected with yourself and the world around you. You become one with the universe, so to speak. And you have the opposite of avidya. You have alertness, wisdom, consciousness, insight. 7 stages lead to that condition. Which 7 stages might they be? Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana. Patanjali says, here, yoga, that is what you need. And that will lead to more alertness, more insight, wisdom, connection with Purusha, the soul, the heart. Yoga. And I have to say again, emphasize, yoga is a practical science. Remember that Svatmarama in chapter 1 said, only reading or talking about yoga doesn't lead to transformation. And in the next sutra he said, just wearing the clothes of a yogi doesn't lead to transformation. What does it mean? You must practice. It is practice that brings about true transformation. So try at least. And every time when you practice, you will feel something that will motivate you to try again tomorrow. And if you are one of those people of many that are too busy to practice every day, then try to practice at least a couple of times with some intervals. But it is through practice that we truly achieve change, transformation. Sutra 28, we'll just rub it in a little bit more. From the practice of the component exercises of yoga on the destruction of impurity, impurity is your conditioning, arises spiritual illumination, which develops into awareness of reality. Do I need to say more? When we are ignorant because we have no access to the source, the universal source of wisdom, knowledge, insight. Because we are conditioned. From the moment we are born, we are impressed with daily experiences that form, that shape the way that we see ourselves and the world on a very superficial level. So, what is interesting here is that spirituality is of a much higher value than we think. It transforms the human being into functioning on a higher level of consciousness from which not only you will benefit, but the world at large, society, the people around you benefit from your transformation. So, but spirituality is being seen in many ways, but not that valuable way. Spirituality is seen as a luxury for some people, and for other people it is seen as eccentric or superstitious, unnecessary. Now, why would you go to church every Sunday? Or in Korea, people go even to church every day. We look at spirituality as something. The people that think they are practicing spirituality by going to church or temple or even to yoga, they are still separated in the view of Patanjali, still in the dark, in ignorance. Until you come across a systematic approach like this that really leads to transformation. Until then, it's all superficial. And that is how it's possible that you're atheist and in fact deeply religious, which I think I am. But atheist for me means I have no connection whatsoever with the established religions. But I'm very religious, naturally, in my heart. My church is in my heart. So I'm a very controversial yogi, a very awkward yogi. And you will be too. And the world will only benefit from it. So just be awkward and controversial. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Patanjali. Let's have a short break and start with asana.